Welcome to Proud Peeps, Season 2, Episode 3. I am joined today by John Levitt, ex-GM of Parsley, not the vegetable. I know that there's a lot of questions. Was he a GM of vegetable or a company? It was a company. He's current co-founder of Elvex, a cool AI company. He's an ex-D1 athlete, an all-around amazing stepbrother. Welcome to the show today, John.
Thank you so much for having me. Great setup there.
I never knew about the D1 athlete, and I think that there's actually a really fun story there. Can we start there? Tell me more about that experience.
You weren't watching me on ESPN?
No, I wasn't.
I was never on ESPN. Yeah, so I went to University of Florida, big SEC school down south, and I majored in sport management and sports enthusiasts. My career goal was always to play in the NBA, and got stopped a little short. Never made my high school team, but somehow
like technically short, right?
Yes, not as short as my dad. But yeah, unfortunately, I never made the dream of playing high school sports even. But when I got to Florida, what I had spent most of my time on was not partying. It was like going to the gym and playing basketball, and ended up blowing out my knee my sophomore year. So that wasn't great for the dream either. But in my rehab, happened to meet some guys that were practice players on the women's team for University of Florida. And they were like, hey, you should come join us. And so I did that for a couple years and took many elbows to the face, couple concussions, but got in great shape. And it was a ton of fun, and it was kind of a dream come true. And I honestly really miss it.
I never even knew that was a thing. So it's like a scout team type, or they just don't have to practice against each other. There, like 18, 20 people on the team, and they just need more bodies so they don't get tired out, I guess? Or
yeah, so they, coach would come to me and say, okay, John, for the next 5 minutes, you're going to be Candace Parker. Can you do that? No, absolutely, I can't do that, but I'll give it my best shot. And yeah, we would run the scout team plays, and we'd have to learn the offense for the other team. But mostly we would play defense and just get beat up, running back and forth in drills all the time. But it was.
Did you get to go to away games and such, or like what was the extra perk? Was there anything?
Just getting to play in an amazing facility with top tiered coaches and athletes, and stretch the limits of what I could do physically. It was amazing. I guess to come back to the theme of the podcast, like I was really proud that I could actually get up to that challenge, especially coming off an injury where there's times where the rehab wasn't going well, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to play again, and I would have really missed that. So yeah, it was like a great experience overall. It was just, no perks needed, just like the ability to be out there and play. It was awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. I mean, that's a great experience. Did anybody that you played against or on that team go to WNBA, or were they part of the U.S. team or anything?
Not WNBA, but a couple of them played professionally overseas, and there were some good athletes there. I'll say one of the biggest challenges I've ever had in my life is on back-to-back plays while we're doing drills, guarding a 5'5" fastest guard in the SEC, and then a 6'7" center back to back. Yeah, it was challenging. Help prepare you for what's to come.
Yeah, that's so cool. I could just imagine all the fun stories and situations that you were involved with. But now you just co-founded this AI startup called Elvex. Would you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yeah. So we started the company about a year and a half ago, and through prior experiences, myself running a sales team and working at a software company that was producing AI features, and seeing all of the challenges that come with enterprise adoption of AI features, kind of realized hey, there's some needs here that are unmet. And so we started building a platform that provided enterprise level data privacy, security, safety, and connections into any language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, with an experience wrapped around it that was extremely well suited for business users. And so that's what we've been building over the last year and a half. And we've done a really good job of getting product out quickly and developing customers like Movable Ink, WordPress, Boston Globe. So, it's been a fast ascent and lots more work to go.
What are the common, like 2, 3 common use cases that you guys are presented with?
So I would say like the two biggest challenges that we're helping companies solve is one, just like the data privacy security issue, making sure that use of LLMs is not leaking into their training models. That's kind of table stakes right now. And the second thing that we're really helping to solve is like, well, how do we actually apply this in ways that are meaningful? And like, how do we build assistants that can solve specific problems that we have across any function in the business? So if I'm a salesperson, I need to respond to an RFP. How do I do that as fast as possible with the best accuracy, with the best references to case studies that we have, all of those types of details. And it's the connections that we build to the internal data and documentation that the companies have, and the ability for business users to basically design the assistance that they need to execute their tasks or their opportunities.
And that's so cool. On the first part, when you go and talk to an organization, do you use that example of that Fortune 500 company that they mistakenly copied and pasted all their financials into the public version, not through the APIs, and it was immediately accessible? Do you use that as like, is that your first slide that you use?
I think there's increasing knowledge of the risks of irresponsible use of AI and irresponsible governance of documentation as it relates to AI. So, yes, that is a talking point. Most of the conversations we have are starting a little bit later than that, but it's something that I would say decision makers at companies probably understand well as a risk, but your average user across the workforce does not. And like, they don't realize that if you're just using a free ChatGPT account or even a paid ChatGPT account, there's no privacy setting by default there. It's like everything you put in here is training the models. I think often it's like, oh, I'm paying for this thing, it must be safe to use. Not always the case. Got to read the fine print.
Yeah. Hey, one of our regular listeners dislikes when I use a bunch of different acronyms. I won't say his name, but he's about 5'3" tall. What, for his sake only, what does the acronym AI stand for?
Artificial intelligence.
Okay, good. Now I won't get some hate mail for the most obvious use of acronyms. I'm sure we would have heard about that one. Working for software companies, we're regularly asked, like, what do you do with AI? The customer almost 100% of the time has no idea why they're asking it. They just know to ask it. And a lot of customers are, just ask because they either don't know what it is, or there's security issues. The common things are, what can you help with workflow? How can we take people out of the equation to allow them to be able to address that? How do we create content? How do we use images? On the second and third one, the content and the images, what's your guys' position on copyright? And I'm still really worried that, when you go in and create an image and you ask for, we're doing sales kickoff next week, and I've generated a bunch of different, cool looking images. If I use them publicly, there is ultimately a risk because that hasn't been solved. Do you guys talk about that, or you guys have a position on that?
Yeah, we get asked about that a lot. And there is a distinct difference between using responses from LLMs for internal purposes.
Large language models.
Yes. Internal use versus external use or commercial use. Yeah. And so we don't operate our own language models. We're connecting into models that our customers have direct relationships with. And so those conversations are often largely managed between the AI provider like OpenAI and our customer. But of course, we get asked about what is the correct way for us to roll this out, because that's part of the role we play. We're experts in the room. We can help you use the technology well. You can ask us questions. We'll help you out. So there's a little bit of risk tolerance, I think, depending on the type of business. Some industries are going to be more, I think, attentive than others to some of the risks and challenges here. Of course, media publishers, media creators are particularly attentive to these types of issues and decisions. And I think it's really murky, and depending on who you ask, you'll get a different opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I used to play one in business, but the best answer is consult with your legal and executive team, and they should set the policies for you. We are not dictating how you use the technology in any way, shape, or form. We're making it available to you so that the possibilities are there.
And I think the cool thing that you guys offer is that you could either connect them to other customers that have solved the same thing. Agreed. You're this, in that case, a middleman where you're not responsible for the large language models or the AI output, but having idea or having opinions. I'm sure your customers, look for that. Some of the other use cases, I mean, I think are super fascinating. But one of the things, and you kind of mentioned with the security, being in B2B software for 20 something years, you got to fill out these RFPs, and the security questions always ask about log files and who accessed what and did what and when. Do you? I think that what you guys offer, you offer that quasi level of granularity, and that's probably a huge point, a selling point, right? And I think that's like when I go in and use Gemini, there's it's on my computer, on my account. The company has no idea that I did that. And if something is ever, transpires legally, there's no log file that the company can call.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's a selling point for you guys, that you guys kind of track down to that level of usage and show control over who has access to what, right?
Yeah, it's important for some businesses, especially those that are in like regulated industries and otherwise are just like facing auditability, scrutiny, and things like that. So we do keep an audit log for every interaction that's going back and forth, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is for what we just talked about, and two is for enablement. A lot of the users here actually appreciate that someone can observe and help. Now, there are some businesses who are like, we don't want people thinking we're watching over their shoulder. And so like what level of access is actually appropriate? And that's one of the features that we allow to be turned off. And it's a business decision by the leadership team there if it's something that they feel is required or beneficial. We help them manage that in the best way possible. But even, if you think about a business that has even 1,000 people, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of requests every single month that are going through the system. No one's going to sit there and read every single one. I don't ever imagine that like that's the case. That's not the purpose. It's literally, hey, if there's a problem or if we need to run some analytics to make sure that use cases are within, allowed policies and things like that, we have a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, very cool. You've accomplished a lot and currently, doing some amazing things, co-founding this business. I've been excited to ask you, of all people, this question, but what are you most proud of?
I think so I'll confine to like professional career for this question. So I spent 12 years.
Lisa paid me to make sure that you said her and the kids, but you failed that one.
They're here with me all the time.
Yeah, but the elvex icon is bigger on your Frisbee than the.
Yeah, fair enough. Should I put the hat on now?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Bring out all the swag.
Yeah. I think the business and the way that we built the business at Parsley is something I was really proud of because after graduating college, it was 2008. It was a tough job market, but I was confident, thought I would find something really quick. Didn't work out, and kind of like stumbled into starting a company myself. This is a company prior to Parsley, ran that for 3 years, made a ton of mistakes. The mentors I had at the time was like, the way you get things done are by yelling at people. And so I was like, well, that doesn't really sound like me, but I'll try it. And I did, and it sucked, didn't work. And then getting to Parsley, I was, employee number 5 there, and seeing the way that company was built, and then realizing very quickly, oh, this fits with my values. Like we can build a company this way, we can lead in this way. And the impact on the culture and the success of the business and all that was just like so different. People loved to work there. And the employee retention and the love that we had from customers was something that like, it wasn't just because of the value of the products that we were offering. It was like the way that we operated our business. And so thinking about building this next company, that's something that is very important for me to hold on to. I think there's some things that have to be different about this company in terms of like how we build it, how we scale it. But I don't think we have to lose the, personal relationships, the touch, the culture that we built, and just like the empathy and understanding for people, which I think goes a really, really long way. And ultimately, like if people love working here and love working with us, it's going to be a lot easier to build a successful company. So I'm really proud of like my ability to pivot from what I saw to what I realized was correct, and for everyone that we worked with, because everyone played a role. It wasn't just like the founders or the leaders. It's like every employee has that responsibility to be a leader and lift people up.
I love what you said. Everybody is different, and the motivation essentially is different. And to basically say, I have one play and it's to yell at people and to make them, create a fear based environment, that sucks. Like, okay, that might work in one situation for three people, but not, the totality. And that drives me crazy. I mean, I came from a place last year that was fear based entirely, and it's frustrating. Some people need that, most people don't. And to your point, you pivoted and how do you adapt, knowing that everybody's motivated by different things. Some people are motivated by job, title, money. Some people are motivated by what they accomplish on a daily basis. And as leaders, like if you don't adjust to those individuals and you treat everybody the same, it's never going to work. So that's pretty cool. And I think your co-founder is similarly, right? I mean, you guys all learn very similar things. So
yeah, it's something that we value when we're hiring others too. Is like making sure we are in line with how they want the company to work and how they want to be a part of making that company work. There was a few hires that we've had over time that like weren't the right people, and looking back it's like, oh, this obviously wasn't going to work because there wasn't a match to the expectations coming into this company. And anytime you can have like a better expectation versus reality, the closer those can be, I think like the better it is for everybody, obviously. But it takes some time to learn that sometimes.
yeah, I started to do a document that explained like who I am and others to the folks that would be working for me, because there's nothing more frustrating, in my opinion, than trying and failing, trying and succeeding, learning your boss. And so I come right out of the gate. I'm like, here's who I am. I'm a big fan of strength finders. Here's my strengths. Here's what motivates me. Here's how I operate. Here's what I expect. And you kind of like get over that hurdle. And then I, expect similar, not documentation back, but like everybody is different. I mean, I'm different than the person who I just replaced in this role, and we have to operate differently. And employees get worried, frustrated, concerned because they don't know where they stand. And the quicker they can come out of the gate, even new employees, like, here's how I operate, here's what you can expect. And as long as you adhere to that, I've always found that super helpful.
Yeah. Hi, I'm going to ask you a question. Flip the microphones around here. How do you manage performance reviews, like with that context in mind? Because I think like everyone takes feedback differently, and everyone maybe gets like motivated differently. But performance reviews often are just like, here's our structure. We use this across the entire company or the entire team, and it doesn't necessarily like lend itself well to that individual personalization.
Yeah, great question. It's happening now, and it's interesting coming into this business, and I'm having to see what other people wrote for these folks and trying to figure that out. But I'm a big fan of in the moment performance reviews, and as long as it's documented, I'm not a fan of the annual where you just spend time and entering things, because usually it's the micro moments that make up the feedback.
Yeah.
But the documentation of that is critical. So for my directs, I literally, it's like every call isn't a performance review, but there's a, hey, here's what you said did that I think that we can improve. Here's what I think you said did that was really good. How do you document that? Sometimes a bit of a struggle, but you're right. Like, some people need to have that review. Some people entirely have a review because of the job matrix. We're just going through this now. Like, how do I get from a P3 to a P4? How do I get there? And it's too subjective. You can't just put it all in writing. So how do you know the direction you're going? And
Yeah.
I think most of the time people fail where the employee has no idea where they stand. And if
Yeah.
you're not doing that monthly, weekly, whatever, like, it's a guess. And especially because, like, if you haven't worked with folks before, like, you can't take 2 years to do it. So it's in the moment feedback with as strong a documentation for most people. So what about you guys? How do you manage those reviews?
Well, a little bit different now as a very small company. We're about 13 people, so a little less formal right now, but building the framework to have a more formal process that we can kind of roll out. I think documentation on an ongoing basis is very important. One, so that people like don't have to wait 6 months to realize there was something they could have changed. But two, bringing this back to Elvex a little bit, like in the world of AI, having documentation, it allows you to process it differently when it comes time to deliver that like
Mm-hmm.
annual review. There's only so much information I can hold in my head across weekly conversations over the prior 52 weeks. uh, I don't mind some help from an AI system that can allow me to deliver a more comprehensive review that's more helpful. Versus, I think what happens a lot with managers and leaders is it's not a task that you particularly enjoy. So you wait until the last minute. And then it's like, well, let me just see what's on top of my mind. And that's what goes into the review. And that's a really poor use of everyone's time. So, it's like one of those areas that I think from an AI use case perspective gets a little touchy with some folks. And it maybe some people would say, like, oh, this is cheating. Like, you as the manager should be putting in the work. I view it differently. I think you're putting in the work consistently across the year by having the conversations, keeping the documentation. But when it comes time to like turn those human generated thoughts and feedback into something that is, constructive and useful for the recipient, yeah, why not use every tool and technology at your disposal to make that as useful as possible?
You're right. I mean, collecting the notes wherever those are added and then kind of summarizing it, feeding into tool. Software solves all the problems. Oh, no, wait. Software doesn't solve all problems, but we use this tool called Lattice. And I was a little bit reluctant, but if you keep up with it, that's where you enter your agenda points, what you talked about on your one-on-ones. It syncs with Outlook. So, it's a separate app, which is, annoying. But the culmination of that basically puts it into that view where you can kind of see your meeting notes, the agenda items, and it can kind of summarize it for you, which I think is interesting. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is an interesting thing. I think we do OKRs. OKRs are not meant to be associated to MBOs. Objectives, key results, business objectives, but it's hard not to. Like, if there's a raise in the future for somebody, you kind of need to know, did they achieve their OKRs? But the foundational premise of OKRs is they should not be related to comp.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, all those are meshed together in many worlds, because like, how do I know how to get to that role? And how do I know to get to this comp? Tell me my exact path. That's how, like, 25% of people operate,
Yeah.
and it's difficult. So yeah, mashing that all together is certainly an interesting, process. And using AI, do you use any explicit AI to do that, or are you thinking about it?
Well, we use elvex for everything. From a model perspective, we tend to prefer Claude for most tasks, and then we're building our own assistants on top of the models. But we have access to a bunch
Claude.
of.
Okay, so you feed it into Claude. Do you have something in Elvex that you've created, like a template to provide for feedback like this, or
Mhm.
collect it? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like one of the coolest things about the platform that we're building now is like just the other day this happened where our lead investor forwarded this new like startup that he found, and it's like a integrated into your email AI thing that like can generate responses back based on your prior history and documentation that you load into it and everything. We're like, oh, this is really cool, can save a ton of time. And upon seeing that, simultaneously myself and my CEO sent Slack messages in our founder chat, which was like, Elvex can do this. like, why, like, so like we're starting to more and more just realize like we can use AI to build any type of solution that we want. Like, obviously
Yeah.
not any type of solution, but like any number of things that you would otherwise have to, like you were kind of just mentioning, instead of switching between like I have to use this thing for this and this other thing for this, like whether it's different AI models or softwares overall, like we are starting to see centralization on our platform where it does make it a lot easier to do all of the different workflows that you want to build, giving you exact control to build it how you want to build it to be like exactly the thing that you want to use every single day.
I talk a lot about like workflow as I'm getting up to speed on this business. I say, tell me about your workflow. Like, and that to me means like, which apps do you use? What do how do you process? Not just what dashboards and data that you use. And at most businesses, it's pretty intense. I mean, there's, 18 different applications that the marketing team uses on a daily basis. That's insane.
Yeah.
I love the idea that if I don't have to decide where to go for what, Lattice for this, Gemini for this, right? Like, if you put some interface on top of it, that's a great selling point where you're using your logic as to where to apply that connection to,
Yeah.
and you basically force the prompt, right? Like, are you looking for to provide feedback? Are you looking to do, create images? What are you looking to do? And then you guys create the logic behind that. I think that's an unbelievable space to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like even just within the language models themselves, like we have users that come in and say, okay, so I like using Claude for the writing style, but I prefer to use GPT for research because Claude can't access the web. But then I have to process these large files, which I have to go to Gemini for. It's like, this is way too complex already. You shouldn't have to use 3 language models, like 3 separate logins and paid seats for these different things. But that's kind of how it is until, people find their way to Elvex.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, app consolidation is a big thing. I mean, I'm literally going through that right now. Like, what can we remove? What are basically doing the same thing? And I'd rather get one that does 80% of what we need than 7 that does 100, because you're never going to use the totality of it. So, last question for you. So I call your dad Papa John. My kids call him Grandpa John. And I'm just curious of your best John story, your best dad story. Do you have anything off the top of your head that you'd be willing to share publicly?
Uh, I know the one that he loves to share most, and I love it also. But my dad was the head athletic trainer for Seton Hall University here in New Jersey for many, many years. And specifically, he was the head trainer for the basketball team. And this was around the time they were in the national championship game and going to NCAAs every year. So this was like late 80s through late 90s. And those basketball fanatics might know a name, PJ Carlesimo, very famous head coach for Seton Hall, and then went on to coach in the pros. And I guess going back to some earlier conversation, he was kind of like prolific for using his voice at very high levels to motivate people to do things that he wanted them to do. He would yell a lot. And I mean, it worked for him, I guess. He was successful, right? Team got to the national championship game. I would hang around the facility all the time. And I'd like to, I was like 5 years old. I would go in the gym, dribble around. I'd try to get some shots up. And story goes, one day it was like, a few minutes before practice, I'm in the gym shooting around. PJ comes in, says, "What are you doing in here? Get out of my gym." Something like that, taking some liberties with the exact language. I ran crying back into the training room where my dad was. And he's like, "What happened? What's wrong?" "PJ yelled at me. He told me to get out of the gym." And he just marches straight down the hall into the head coach's office and kicks the door open. And story goes, PJ goes, "Hey, Bunny." He called my dad Bunny. "Bunny, what's up?" All happy, like, right? "Did you yell at my son?" No. I would never yell at that little Bunny. "Don't you ever yell at my son again." And it was cool. I love that he stood up for me in that moment. And it's just kind of a funny way to kind of like see how people react and people are perceived too, right? Like PJ is one of the sweetest guys, but sometimes to get people motivated on the court, yeah, he'd be a little angry with you.
Two things. One, I pictured your dad having to get on a step stool in order to like get in his face.
Yeah.
Figured I only need 2 short jokes. And the second, who was PJ Carlesimo was the coach that was strangled in the heat of a practice or whatever. It was Latrell Sprewell. That's who it was, right?
Yeah.
So one and the same. So that's interesting. So at least your dad didn't go that far.
No, talk about 2 personalities that didn't mesh. And when you're constructing a team or a group of employees that need to work together and follow leadership and be in step, yeah, that apparently didn't work.
Yes, was that at Golden State? That wasn't at the Knicks, I think, right? That was Golden State.
Golden State,
yeah. Oh, Papa John stories, Bunny stories. We could go on all day. He would love it. But with that, I think I'm going to end the episode. Thanks for joining, John. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.